When Andrew Ng was 15 years old, he went to a space camp where he learned how to build water-propelled rockets. That was all it took to get him hooked. It may all seem like fun and games, but Andrew is serious. He's staking his future in space. And one day, he hopes to play a part in getting real rockets off the ground for Singapore. Singapore? Space?
The US Kennedy Space Center, where such missions take off, would occupy 80% of our tiny island. Why would a small country like Singapore be interested in a place in space? Will we even have the space for it? Are we aiming too high? In this building, in the middle of Singapore's central business district, is where we handle business that's out of this world.
Not many people know about this, but the office has been around since 2013. Its job? To support the 30 companies and 1,000 people involved in our budding space industry.
But why is such a small country like ours interested in space? How seriously are we taking this?
You certainly need to bridge the gap and get a lot of technology breakthroughs.
Well, Jonathan Hung is dead serious about it. For the last 14 years, he's been wooing government players, research foundations, and international partners to make us a bona fide space hub.
When we talk about space, do you also mean going to the moon and going to Mars?
Singapore is a small country. We've got to really pick and choose what we want to do. Right now, Singapore's play is very much within the satellite domain. Now, satellites can do quite a lot. Specifically, we cover telecommunications. We also cover advanced navigation. Those are low-hanging fruits for the country.
How will going to space benefit Singapore's economy?
There are good jobs. We can create these complex advanced manufacturing activities. All these things will help to generate and spur the economy on.
So, Singapore's foray into space is not so much spurred by starry-eyed ambition, but more grounded pragmatism.
Station Scribble Space Ground 2 for satellite deployment.
Our first ticket into space for now are satellites.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, deploy. On time.
We are more reliant on satellites than we realize. Without satellites providing location tracking, apps we take for granted on our smartphones like ride-hailing, Google Maps, to even dating apps would stop working. Satellites are often thought of as communications technology, but really, they are space technology. You see, scientists break down the skies above us into layers. At the bottom is the troposphere, the layer where planes fly. The stratosphere is directly above it. Here, you find the ozone layer that protects us from the sun's rays. Finally, above that, at 100 kilometers up, is the Kármán line. This is where most people, including NASA, consider where Earth's atmosphere ends and space begins. Where do satellites go? Well, about 2,000 kilometers above ground to as far away as 35,000 kilometers. There are around 2,500 active ones currently orbiting around Earth 24/7. And experts say even more of them will be in space. The key problem with the current internet infrastructure is that cables laid under the sea carry 99% of all international data transmitted. So coastal regions literally have the internet brought right up to their doorstep. But this means areas very far inland are left high and dry with barely any internet coverage. Enter startup Trans-Celestial.
Okay, Rohit, what is this?
So this is our device that we have made over the last 4 years. It's called Centauri. What we want to do is effectively turn this baby up, and it just connects up to a satellite. The idea is to then establish a global network of satellites, which uses the same technology, but then we can drop in a laser link anywhere on this planet and get them connected.
So in order to get coverage globally, we're going to need quite a lot of satellites floating around in space?
Absolutely. The current satellite TV that you have, the satellites which provide that sit in an orbit known as geosynchronous orbit. That's 35,000 kilometers. To send a signal from ground to geosynchronous orbit is almost a second of delay. Compared to that, we are going to be putting our satellites at around 1,000 kilometers at the low Earth orbit level. It takes almost like less than 5 milliseconds, which is basically like around 1,000 times faster. When you're in low Earth orbit, you need to put a lot more of the satellites to cover the entire planet.
My internet connection can be reliant on lasers like this.
Absolutely. We are talking about hundreds of gigabits or terabits. You are talking about 1,000 to 1,000,000 times faster than your home internet connection.
Wait, do you say 1,000,000 times faster?
And that's not even scratching the surface of the capability. More than half the world is still unconnected. So we're talking about roughly 3.5 billion people, right? They either have no internet connectivity or they have very basic 2G level phone services. If you want a city to be connected, all you have to do is position a satellite above that, drop a laser link, and you can power high bandwidth internet to everyone.
But how about Singapore? I mean, we're one of the most connected cities in the world. How will this benefit us?
One of the other benefits of effectively deploying our technology to roll out 5G faster, if you're building fiber networks, a kilometer of fiber is roughly around $100,000 to $150,000. It's the cost of getting the permits, digging the roads, putting the cable nicely inside, then repaving the roads and stuff. Now, our device usually comes in at 1/10 of that price.
Fast, affordable, and reliable internet powered by satellites sounds like a gift from the heavens. But it's not something that's landing anytime soon. Trans-Celestial is still doing research and development for their global space network, with an eye on rolling it out by end 2024.
Smartphones have become a way of life. But imagine if you didn't have internet connection. Then you'd have to bring all of these around. Street directory for getting around, a radio for listening to music, video player for your movies. Yet, nearly half of humanity is forced to live like that today. That's why people are putting so much effort into space technology, because the technologies we send up there could help solve world problems. But what does it take to send a satellite into space?
These photos capture a historic moment in time. It was taken in late 2015. It shows engineers in Singapore preparing to send a commercial satellite to space. It doesn't look like much from these photos, but this took 5.5 years and a team of 55 engineers to build. Called Telios 1, the satellite gave us eyes in the skies, allowing us to see what's going on in the region. Geospatial analysts study these pictures, providing interesting insights that organizations will pay for. In September 2018, the Indonesian city of Palu was hit by a devastating earthquake and tsunami. Captured 5 days after the first tremors, this satellite image reveals the extent of the damage.
So for example, if there's any road networks that are affected, right, if there are any building that collapse, we are able to identify it as fast as we can. And this, we can inform the authority to tell them where they should assign their search and rescue effort.
So what else can Telios 1 imagery do?
If we look at this image, right, actually we tasked Telios 1 to capture vessels parked at the western anchorage.
So these are all the vessels, the green rectangles.
Yes, so we know that certain vessels will participate in illegal activities like illegal oil bunkering, illegal ship-to-ship transshipment, human trafficking, or illegal smuggling of goods. So So ships carry an active emitter called the automated identification system, and it will transmit a signal to tell the authorities where the ship is, the type of cargo it's carrying. So some vessels will turn off this transmitter. In the maritime domain, we call these vessels as dark vessels. With Helios 1, because we are able to capture imagery over Singapore's waters, we can check the presence of such vessel that's turned off the AIS, because even if they turn off the AIS, they cannot hide from the eyes in the sky.
Right, apart from this, is there any other use of satellite imagery?
I'll share with you our energy product. This image here is Pulau Bukom. There's oil storage facilities on the island. The roof of the oil storage tank can move up and down, and this depends on the volume of oil within the storage tank. When we capture this image, we are able to see the shadow in the inside of the tank and the outside of the tank. A full tank will have hardly any inner shadow as compared to the outer shadow, whereas an empty tank will have inner shadow of about the same length as the outer shadow.
Okay.
And this will give us a picture of how the oil volume changes in the various oil storage tanks around the world. They can use this information to feed into their model, therefore make a more accurate prediction on the oil prices, say, in the future.
There's just one problem. Helios 1 cannot see through clouds and is completely blind at night. So we need something with more powerful vision. Meet Helios 2, or the beginning bit of it anyway. When it's finally put together, the satellite will carry a radar that will be able to capture images day or night, and no matter the weather conditions. But that's likely to take another few years before it goes to space. For now, it is undergoing rigorous testing.
These guys are satellites being built. They're work in progress.
Yes, they are work in progress. In fact, these are the structure models of the satellite where we use them to verify that the structure can survive the vibration of the journey to space.
Okay.
The satellite has to be launched on a rocket to space. The rocket works on the principle of controlled explosions. So all these controlled explosions actually impart a lot of vibrations to the satellite. So to make sure that the satellite can actually survive this vibration, on Earth we actually built the satellite and put it on a big shaker. Because once you send the satellite into space, there's no way to retrieve it, to repair it.
When it comes to designing and building a satellite, what do you have to consider?
We have to understand that the satellite has to operate in a very different condition and environment compared to our everyday electronics. So it actually goes through hot, cold, about 14 to 15 times a day. It travels more than 7 kilometers per second.
Do airplanes even travel that fast?
No.
The space sector is worth big money. And it's not from sending humans into outer space, but from these. More than half of space-related commercial activity is driven by products and services offered by satellite companies. One estimate projects that the whole space sector could generate revenue of $1 trillion or more by 2040. That's why investors are racing to cash in on this new pot of gold.
Since 2004, they've put in $135 billion into the global space sector. Singapore, though just a tiny island, accounts for 7% of the global share.
That's pretty significant for a country that doesn't have the ability to send anyone up to space. Yet.
And startup founder Ng Zhenning wants a slice of this space pie. The 30-year-old used to work as an engineer in the defense sector. But in 2017, he gave that up to set up his own space company. He now leads a small but mighty team.
But what does this company have as its winning edge? This satellite. Yes, this satellite that weighs less than 10 kilograms can also be sent up to space. And it can do almost anything a conventional satellite can, like monitor weather conditions or track my latest online splurge. Wait, okay, satellites to me, I always thought that satellites were these huge machines with like the solar panels or whatever and a chunk in the middle orbiting around Earth.
Yeah.
And this is totally different from that. How did that happen?
It's all thanks to miniaturization of technology. Remember, like your smartphones, they used to be like the size of a very, very big brick, and then you go to the coffee shop and slam on the table. So that has shrunk down to the size of an iPhone. The same thing has happened for nanosatellites.
Space is the limit, right? There's so much space out there. Why do we need small satellites?
But the budget is also the limit. Building such satellites, it's roughly 50 times cheaper.
50?
Yep. We even expect the cost to even go down further. In the olden days, it used to be the engineers who built and designed the satellite, and that's very labor intensive. But today we are looking at mass manufacturing of these satellites. We're working with contract manufacturers to figure out how we can streamline the entire assembly process, and hopefully by 2024 we should be able to have this assembly line here in Singapore.
Being small has its advantages. It means that the satellite is cheaper and faster to make. But they have some downsides while trying to go up into space.
Satellites come in various sizes. They can be as big as a bus or as small as a shoebox.
But the small ones find it hard to get a ride into space. Everything on Earth that wants to go into space needs to hitch a ride on a rocket. But just like boarding an airplane, there are VIP customers. Big satellites get priority because they take up most of the space. So if their production schedules have been delayed, then everyone else just has to wait. Such delays are frustrating for small satellites. To solve the problem, rocket makers are coming up with smaller spacecraft, so small satellites can have their own dedicated ride. One rocket scientist in Singapore is looking into this. 29-year-old Simon Gavouche is in the business of making small rockets. He's starting with building a research rocket like this. But this rocket will not reach a full orbit in space. It's just a prototype of sorts for something bigger and more powerful.
Simon's dream rocket will be 18 meters high. That's 6 floors.
Even then, it's still about 6 times smaller than some of the largest rockets ever made, which tower as high as 110 meters. If you think that's ambitious, well, Simon has grander plans in his horizon. He wants to send rockets to space from locations nearer to Singapore.
What makes Singapore such a good location?
Being close to the equator is very, very helpful in launching a rocket. You can go into any kind of orbit. It means you can get into any kind of market niche.
What's more, launching from the equator would save fuel. That's because, compared to the polar regions, the surface at the equator is moving faster, giving a rocket an extra push. From here, it's also easier to enter an equatorial orbit, where 25 satellites can cover the region 24/7 compared to 120 satellites otherwise.
So we're at the equator, but what about land?
We don't have much land in Singapore, but there is a lot of sea. And sea launching has also been done for a number of years.
So what, do we need to build a launch pad?
Very simple. All you have to do is take a barge, retrofit it a little bit, install some extra equipment, and you can use it for launching a rocket into space. So we have to really stop thinking of ourselves as small. We have plenty of room around.
Where is the ideal location for a launch pad?
Well, aside from Indian Ocean, which would be much easier to arrange because we would not be overflying anybody's territory, we are looking at possibility of South China Sea. and there in fact already is designated airspace for military training. It's not very far from the coastline of Johor. We are currently exploring possibility of conducting launch operations from that site, and this would be extremely helpful because of its proximity. The closer your launch zone is, the faster you can go there and return.
Yes.
And save money in the process.
So in order to do so, we've got a lot of coordination to do with our neighbors, right?
We will need Indonesia and Malaysia's coordination in such activities. That is absolutely necessary. I think we need to reassure that our activity is peaceful, it's safe, and removes all the concerns which regional partners might have in conducting such an operation.
Why should Singapore invest in its ability to launch rockets?
Why should we invest in really anything? In Changi Airport in the first place, even before that in the maritime infrastructure. I think in 20 years' time, a country with no sovereign launch capability will be a little bit like a country that doesn't have its own airline. Space is becoming a ground of doing business, on top of exploration, on top of more lofty ideas, of course.
So it could be a long time before Singapore can say, we've sent a rocket to space. But until then, it means we're going to need more bright young minds working on such ambitious projects.
Here in the National University of Singapore, a student group set up in 2019 is attempting to build a rover that can explore Mars. Scientists have found evidence that there is water on Mars. So robotic rovers will play a key role in exploring whether humans can live there one day.
How difficult is it to build this? This is the prototype, right? So this already looks so complicated to me.
And it is complicated because there are many different subsystems. For instance, if you look at the circuit board, you do need electrical engineering experience to work with that. If you look at the cam system, you need mechanical engineering knowledge. Even the robot operating system, you need someone who has done computer science, for instance.
I'm not a science or engineering kind of person. Why should I care about this or space?
Probably space tourism. The trend of the industry now, the cost of launching a rocket is increasingly cheaper. And that would make space tourism a very much a viable option for a lot of people.
We tend to think of space as something that's way out there and has no connection to us here on Earth. But that's not true. The technologies we send up into outer space could supercharge our lives here on Earth. We may be small, but we have the right location, talent, and R&D facilities here. If we do this right, we could be the space hub of Asia in the future. And that's why it matters.